July 18, 1943. Saint-Lô, France. 178 American bombers thunder across the dawn-lit English Channel at 18,000 feet. By midday, 23 aircraft vanish from formation, their crews presumed lost. Yet something extraordinary happens over the smoke-filled skies of Normandy. 37 B-17 crews deliberately abandon their multi-million-dollar aircraft mid-mission, parachuting into enemy territory while their bombers continue flying, unmanned, fully loaded with bombs, on course toward German positions. At airfields across England, commanders receive bewildering reports of ghost planes striking targets with uncanny precision, their crews already captured or evading through the French countryside. Major General Thomas Reynolds stares at the mission reports, his weathered face illuminated by desk lamplight in a requisitioned English manor house. The strategy defies every principle of conventional air warfare. Pilots abandoning perfectly functional aircraft worth more than $50,000 apiece. Navigators leaping into enemy territory with only a 50-50 chance of survival. By any reasonable standard, this should represent catastrophic failure. Yet Reynolds studies after-action photographs, showing bomb patterns tighter than any previous mission. Casualties dramatically reduced, target destruction rates unprecedented. The ghost planes, it seems, hit their marks with deadly accuracy. "They're going to court-martial every pilot who jumped," says Colonel Harrison, tossing reconnaissance photographs onto Reynolds's desk. "Unless you can explain why they've just given us the most successful bombing run of the entire European campaign." Reynolds studies the photographs, his fingers tracing craters that form almost perfect concentric circles around designated targets. "Have you spoken with Captain Williams yet? Or Lieutenant Parker? They were the first to implement the protocol." "Williams is still missing," Harrison replies, his voice tightening. "Parker was recovered by resistance fighters 3 hours ago. He's currently being escorted through the underground network back toward Allied lines. Preliminary debriefing suggests this was no accident, no panic response to enemy fire. They planned this. The entire squadron knew what they were doing." Reynolds sinks into his leather chair, eyes fixed on the mission photographs. "And their aircraft? Were they recovered?" "That's the strangest part," Harrison says, spreading additional reconnaissance images across the desk. 2 planes crash-landed in fields near the target zone. 3 more went down over the channel during return. But 32 aircraft returned to base, empty. Not a soul aboard. They came home like ghosts following beacons we didn't even know existed. Some with fuel tanks nearly empty, flying on fumes, yet they found their way back with precision that seasoned pilots struggle to match. In a classified laboratory beneath MIT's radiation building, Dr. Eleanor Winters watches as graduate students rebuild a complex gyroscopic mechanism inside what looks like a modified bomb site. At 43, Winters carries herself with the precise dignity of someone who has spent a career being the only woman in rooms full of engineers. Her team works with urgent concentration, rebuilding a system designed to accomplish what military leadership had long considered impossible: an unmanned bombing run, using technology that transforms abandoned aircraft into guided missiles. Winters adjusts wire-rimmed glasses and peers at her clipboard. "The pilots didn't abandon anything," she says to a room of skeptical Air Force officers. "They executed the most sophisticated precision bombing system of the war." But as she studies the mission data, Winters discovers a pattern that makes her blood run cold. The bombing accuracy didn't come from the technology her team spent 3 years developing. It came from something nobody had anticipated, something that would challenge everything the military thought they knew about precision bombing. The room falls silent as she places reconnaissance photographs beside her engineering diagrams. "Our guidance system enhances precision by 15% under optimal conditions," she explains, her finger circling impact patterns. "These results show 83% improvement. Our technology isn't responsible for this. Something else is happening." Colonel Walter Davidson, liaison between Bomber Command and scientific research units, leans forward with undisguised skepticism. "You're saying your system works better than your own calculations predicted? Most scientists would celebrate that outcome." "I'm saying the system isn't producing these results," Winters responds. "The aircraft are achieving precision that exceeds our technical capabilities. We need to understand why." Davidson's expression hardens. Dr. Winters, we've invested millions in your guidance systems. If they're not responsible for these results, then what is? Winters hesitates, aware of how her answer will sound to military men trained in conventional doctrine. The absence of human intervention during final approach. Our data suggests that removing pilots from the equation during the bombing run significantly improves accuracy. It's not what we're adding to the aircraft, it's what we're removing. At Bovingdon Airfield, Technical Sergeant Richard Donovan walks the perimeter of a B-17 that returned without its crew. The bomber shows minimal damage, a few flak bursts near the port wing, nothing that would justify abandonment. Yet chalk markings inside the cockpit tell a different story. Calculations scribbled on the instrument panel, settings fixed in positions that make no sense for conventional flight, a torn page from a technical manual wedged beneath the co-pilot's seat. Donovan runs calloused fingers along control cables that have been modified in ways that violate every maintenance protocol in the technical manual. They weren't abandoning, he mutters. They were upgrading. His assistant, Corporal Jenkins, stares at the bomber's empty cockpit with obvious discomfort. Sir, every pilot I've known would die before abandoning aircraft. It's drilled into them from day one. You stay with your plane. Unless staying means missing the target, Donovan replies, pointing to a hastily installed locking mechanism on the rudder controls. Look at this. They've modified the stabilizers to maintain heading regardless of crosswind or turbulence. Once locked, this plane would fly straight as an arrow no matter what flak bursts were exploding around it. Jenkins shakes his head in disbelief. But who would install unauthorized modifications? And why would pilots agree to jump rather than completing their mission? Donovan's weathered face creases in concentration as he studies ballast weights added to the Bombardier's station. That's what we need to find out, because whatever they discovered might just change everything we think we know about precision bombing. He pulls a folded paper from his pocket, a mission report filed by Lieutenant Parker before his jump. The handwriting conveys urgency, ideas captured between mission planning and execution. Listen to this. Evasive maneuvers during final approach create variance in bomb distribution patterns. Calculations suggest straight and level flight through final minutes would improve accuracy by factor of 4. But no human pilot maintains perfectly straight course under fire. Solution: remove human variable from equation. They figured it out on their own, Donovan whispers, respect evident in his voice. No scientific team, no research grants. Just airmen recognizing that sometimes the bravest action isn't staying with your plane, it's recognizing when your presence undermines the mission. 3,000 miles away, in a basement laboratory at Caltech, Professor Martin Kaplan reviews bombing accuracy statistics that defy explanation. Kaplan had spent the war developing automated systems that could improve precision while reducing crew exposure to enemy fire. His theoretical work suggested that in certain circumstances, human intervention actually decreased accuracy rather than improved it. The military had dismissed his findings as academic nonsense. Pilots and bombardiers were essential, they insisted. No unmanned aircraft could possibly navigate to target, much less deliver ordnance with precision. Yet the St. Lo data reveals something unprecedented. Bombers without crews achieved 83% greater accuracy than those with full complement. Aircraft modified with the experimental Winters-Kaplan guidance system performed even better than predicted by mathematical models. The question wasn't why pilots abandoned their aircraft, but why they hadn't done it sooner. Kaplan's assistant, Dr. Sarah Fleming, compares mission data from conventional bombing runs against the unmanned strikes. The pattern is undeniable, she says, pushing statistical tables across Kaplan's cluttered desk. When crews bail out at specific navigation points and allow pre-programmed systems to manage final approach, accuracy improves dramatically. It's not marginal improvement, it's transformative. Kaplan removes his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. The military will resist this conclusion with everything they have. They've built doctrine around the essential role of the bombardier, the irreplaceable judgment of pilots under fire. Suggesting machines perform better than trained airmen won't just challenge tactical assumptions, it'll threaten institutional identity. Fleming nods in understanding. But the data doesn't lie. Humans introduce variables, minute course corrections, slight adjustments in airspeed, banking to avoid flak. Each correction, however well-intentioned, compounds into significant targeting errors. Kaplan studies flight path tracings that compare crewed versus unmanned approaches. Look here. Human pilots introduce oscillation patterns during evasive maneuvers. Each banking motion creates pendulum effects that ripple through the aircraft, altering bomb trajectory in ways no bombardier can fully compensate for. But the unmanned aircraft maintain consistent flight parameters throughout final approach, creating stable release conditions that produce tighter distribution patterns. It's counterintuitive, Fleming acknowledges. Everything in aviation training emphasizes human judgment as essential. Pilots spend thousands of hours developing skills precisely to handle situations where automated systems might fail. Now we're discovering circumstances where those same skills actually undermine mission objectives. The hardest innovations to accept, Kaplan replies, are those that challenge not just our methods, but our fundamental assumptions about human value. These airmen haven't just discovered a tactical advantage, they've stumbled onto a philosophical reckoning about when human intervention helps versus when it hinders. The morning briefing at 8th Air Force headquarters pulses with tension. Air commanders gather around a tactical map, showing advancing Allied forces stalled outside St. Lo. The Norman hedgerows have created a deadly maze, where German defenders halt every Allied advance. Breaking this stalemate requires precision bombing runs that Allied crews have thus far failed to deliver. Traditional bombing patterns produce wide dispersal, endangering friendly troops while leaving enemy fortifications intact. Brigadier General Howard Kane, Director of Bomber Operations, addresses the room with the careful precision of a man accustomed to making life-or-death decisions. "Gentlemen, what happened yesterday wasn't in the mission plan. Not officially. But I want every crew briefed on the Nightingale Protocol effective immediately." The room erupts in protest. Colonel James Williams, a veteran of 25 bombing missions over Germany, slams his fist against the table. "You're ordering crews to abandon their aircraft? Over enemy territory? That's suicide, not strategy." Kane's expression remains unchanged. "I'm ordering crews to maximize mission success by any means necessary. The data suggests that under specific conditions, an unmanned bomber delivers greater precision than one with a human crew attempting evasive maneuvers. Yesterday's mission confirmed what our scientists have been telling us for months." Williams's face flushes with indignation. "We've spent years developing specialized training for bombardiers. The Norden bombsight represents millions in development funding. Now you're suggesting we throw away that investment and have crews bail out over enemy territory. How will you justify the casualties?" "The same way I justify all casualties," Kane replies, his voice level, "by measuring them against mission objectives achieved. Preliminary data suggests increased precision will significantly reduce overall losses while improving tactical impact. The ground forces stalled outside St. Lo don't care about our doctrine or training protocols. They care about accurate bombing that eliminates enemy positions without endangering friendly troops." Major Richard Coleman, a squadron commander with 18 months in theater, shakes his head in disbelief. "General, you're asking airmen to violate their most fundamental training. We drill into every pilot that abandoning aircraft represents failure. Now, you want them to intentionally bail out over hostile territory. The psychological impact alone is precisely what we're measuring," Kane interrupts. "Initial reports from crews who implemented the protocol suggest the psychological barrier is substantial but surmountable. Once airmen understand they're not abandoning mission, but optimizing execution, resistance diminishes. This isn't about courage versus cowardice, it's about effectiveness versus tradition." As officers file from the room, Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hargrove remains behind, studying reconnaissance photographs with practiced intensity. At 32, Hargrove has already survived 14 missions as a B-17 pilot. His analytical mind recognized patterns that others missed. "There's more to this than removing human error," he says quietly. "The abandonment timing matters. These weren't random ejections under enemy fire. They were calculated exits at precise navigation points." Kane nods. "That's why we need you leading the technical implementation. There's a pattern here that most of our commanders are missing." Hargrove traces flight paths across the tactical map. They're bailing out over areas with known resistance presence. The timing corresponds with completion of initial navigation, but before final approach. It's as though they've discovered an optimal handoff point where human judgment should yield to mechanical consistency. Exactly, Kane confirms. This isn't about abandonment. It's about transfer of control at precisely the right moment. The crews aren't surrendering their mission. They're optimizing execution by removing variables that undermine precision. The pattern emerges from mission data collected across 17 bombing runs over northern France. When pilots abandoned aircraft at specific points, allowing pre-programmed controls to manage the final approach, bomb accuracy improved dramatically. It wasn't that unmanned aircraft performed better in all circumstances, only that human intervention during final approach created variables that reduced precision. The mathematical models showed that a pilot executing evasive maneuvers to avoid flak inadvertently altered bomb trajectory in ways that expanded the distribution pattern. Navigation Officer Lieutenant Jessica Roberts compiles flight data that reveals optimal transfer points based on distance from target, weather conditions, and defensive concentrations. The ideal bailout coordinates form a mathematical curve that balances multiple variables, she explains to the implementation team. We're identifying specific geographic points where crews should activate automatic systems before parachuting. These aren't arbitrary locations. They represent precisely calculated handoff positions that maximize both mission success and crew survival. Meteorologist Captain Andrew Chen correlates weather conditions with bombing accuracy across unmanned versus crewed missions. The data reveals something counterintuitive, he reports. Conventional wisdom holds that human pilots compensate better for variable winds than mechanical systems. But our analysis shows the opposite. Human compensation for crosswinds introduces oscillation patterns that compound over distance, while mechanical stabilizers maintain more consistent headings despite gusty conditions. Intelligence specialist Major Sarah Williams maps German defensive responses to conventional versus unmanned bombing approaches. Enemy tactics developed through encounters with human pilots executing predictable evasive maneuvers, she notes. When aircraft maintain course despite defensive fire, it disrupts established response patterns. Anti-aircraft batteries increase ammunition expenditure while decreasing effectiveness. Fighter intercepts become less successful when aircraft don't respond to standard provocation tactics. At MIT's Radiation Laboratory, Eleanor Winters reviews oscilloscope readings that track minute variations in aircraft trajectory during bombing runs. Her team had developed a guidance system that could maintain course despite atmospheric turbulence or defensive flak. What they hadn't anticipated was how human psychology affected bombing accuracy during the critical final minutes of approach. Pilots make course corrections based on perceived threats, she explains to a room full of military observers. Even minor adjustments, 5 degrees of bank, slight changes in airspeed, multiply into significant targeting errors at release point. The Nightingale Protocol removes those variables from the equation. Captain Michael Sullivan, a bombardier with 7 completed missions, studies the guidance mechanisms with obvious skepticism. You're telling me a machine drops bombs better than I do? I'm telling you that under specific conditions, human judgment introduces variables that reduce accuracy, Winters replies. Your expertise remains essential for mission planning, initial navigation, and system calibration. But during the final approach, mathematical consistency produces better results than human instinct. Sullivan's expression remains dubious. My bombardier training cost the government $20,000 and 1,500 hours. Now you're saying we should just set a course and jump out? Your training remains invaluable, Winters responds. The system requires precise initial calibration that only experienced bombardiers can provide. But once calibrated, maintaining that precision through the final approach means eliminating variables, including the subtle corrections humans inevitably introduce under stress. Engineering specialist Captain Robert Chen demonstrates mechanical modifications that transform conventional bombers into automated precision platforms. These aren't sophisticated technological innovations, he explains. They're elegant mechanical solutions that address specific variables human pilots inadvertently introduce. Gyroscopic stabilizers maintain level flight despite atmospheric turbulence. Heading locks prevent course deviation under stress. Automatic trim adjustment compensates for changing weight distribution as fuel burns. The implementation of Nightingale Protocol transforms bomber operations across the European theater. Engineering teams modify aircraft with automatic stabilization systems that maintain precise course once activated. Navigators calculate exact coordinates where crews should parachute, maximizing both mission success and survival probability. Training programs teach pilots to overcome their deepest instincts, to deliberately abandon aircraft they've been conditioned to protect at all costs. At airfields across England, maintenance crews install the Winters Kaplan guidance packages into B-17 and B-24 bombers. The modifications include gyroscopic stabilizers, barometric triggers, and mechanical computers that can maintain course despite variable winds or enemy fire. Each system requires precise calibration specific to individual aircraft characteristics: wing loading, engine performance, control surface responsiveness. Technical Sergeant Donovan oversees installation on the Memphis Belle II, a bomber that has survived 23 missions. The pilots hate this, he confides to a junior mechanic. Everything in their training tells them to stay with the aircraft. Now we're telling them the mission works better if they jump out over enemy territory. Lieutenant Thomas Mitchell, a pilot with the 303rd Bomb Group, studies the modified cockpit controls with undisguised suspicion. Mitchell had flown 11 missions, surviving heavy flak and fighter attacks through skill and instinct. The suggestion that his aircraft could bomb more accurately without him feels like personal criticism. "I've hit targets from 18,000 feet in heavy cloud cover," he tells Donovan. "Now you're telling me I should just set some dials and bail out? That's not flying, that's quitting." Donovan adjusts a calibration setting before responding. "Lieutenant, this isn't about better pilots. It's about better bombing. The math doesn't care about courage or skill. It cares about consistent approach vectors and release timing." Mitchell runs his hand across the familiar contours of the control yoke. "We're trained to stay with our aircraft no matter what. It goes against everything we believe. Sometimes victory requires challenging our most basic assumptions," Donovan replies. "The goal isn't keeping planes in the air, it's putting bombs on target. If bailing out accomplishes that more effectively, then staying with the aircraft becomes sentiment, not strategy." Mitchell studies the automatic guidance system with growing interest rather than rejection. "So these modifications maintain straight and level flight, regardless of crosswinds or turbulence, and they continue on course despite flak bursts that would normally force evasive action." "Exactly," Donovan confirms. "They're not sophisticated, just elegant mechanical solutions that address specific problems. The heading locks prevent course deviation under stress. Gyroscopic stabilizers maintain level flight despite atmospheric disruption. Automatic trim compensates for changing weight distribution as fuel burns." "And you're saying this improves bombing accuracy by how much exactly?" 83% in ideal conditions, never less than 47% even in the worst weather. That's the difference between destroying a target and merely damaging it, between breaking through enemy lines and remaining stalled for weeks. Mitchell nods slowly, his resistance gradually yielding to tactical reality. "So when exactly do we bail out? And what happens after we leave the aircraft?" The resistance among flight crews runs deeper than professional pride. Strategic bombing doctrine had evolved around the premise that human judgment remained essential for mission success. Bombardiers spent thousands of training hours mastering the complexities of the Norden bomb site. Pilots practiced formation, flying under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Navigators developed skills that combined mathematical precision with intuitive adjustment. The Nightingale Protocol challenged this entire paradigm. Psychological officer Captain James Westfield monitors crew morale as protocol implementation expands. "The barrier isn't fear of parachuting," he reports. "It's perceived abandonment of duty. These men have internalized the principle that leaving one's aircraft represents failure. Reframing that action as mission optimization requires fundamental cognitive restructuring." Training officer Major Samuel Peterson developed simulation exercises that help crews internalize the new protocol. "We're conditioning them to recognize specific conditions where bailout optimizes mission success," he explains. "The goal is transforming what feels like abandonment into tactical adaptation that improves outcomes." Chaplain Robert Hendricks counsels pilots struggling with moral dimensions of the protocol. "They're wrestling with profound questions," he notes. Is it right to save themselves while sending unmanned aircraft toward target? Does their oath require remaining at controls regardless of tactical considerations? The breakthrough comes when they recognize courage sometimes means challenging assumptions rather than blindly following doctrine. At 8th Air Force Headquarters, intelligence officers compile survival statistics that add another dimension to the strategic calculation. Crews bailing out over friendly territory or advancing Allied lines showed 78% successful evasion rates, significantly higher than anticipated. French resistance networks had become increasingly effective at recovering downed airmen, moving them through established escape routes back to England. What had initially seemed like a desperate last resort was evolving into a legitimate tactical option. Intelligence analyst Captain Rebecca Chen maps recovery patterns across occupied France. The resistance has developed sophisticated extraction capabilities, she reports. With proper coordination, crews can parachute into areas where recovery teams await them, dramatically improving survival rates. Medical officer Captain Thomas Richards assesses physical outcomes from planned bailouts versus emergency ejections. Controlled parachute deployments produce significantly fewer injuries than emergency abandonment under combat stress, he notes. Airmen properly prepared for descent show dramatically better physical outcomes than those forced to bail from damaged aircraft. The first full implementation of Nightingale Protocol occurs on August 3, 1943. 62 bombers target German artillery positions along the Saint-Lô-Perrier road, a critical juncture for the planned Allied breakout. 41 crews activate automatic guidance systems at predetermined coordinates, bailing out over areas where resistance networks maintain strong presence. Their aircraft continue toward target, flying straight and level despite increasing flak concentration. Lieutenant Colonel Hargrove monitors the operation from a command aircraft circling at 25,000 feet, beyond the range of anti-aircraft fire. Through binoculars, he watches the unmanned bombers maintain perfect formation, while crewed aircraft execute evasive maneuvers that disrupt bombing patterns. The resulting strike places 93% of bombs within 300 yards of designated targets, an unprecedented accuracy rate that stuns even the protocol's strongest advocates. As Hargrove observes the unmanned bombers, his radio man intercepts German communications. "Sir," the radio operator calls, "the Germans are reporting ghost planes continuing through flak that would normally force evasive action. They're ordering fighters to prioritize these aircraft, calling them phantom bombers that ignore defensive fire." General Omar Bradley, commanding 1st Army Ground Forces, receives the after-action report with initial disbelief. "You're telling me our most successful bombing run came from pilotless aircraft? That can't be right." Yet reconnaissance photographs confirm the assessment. German defensive positions that had withstood weeks of conventional bombing lie shattered. Allied armored units advance through gaps that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. The strategic impact extends beyond physical destruction. German defenders report collapsing morale when faced with bombers that continue their approach regardless of defensive fire intensity. The psychological dimension hadn't appeared in any of the mathematical models. German anti-aircraft batteries, accustomed to aircraft that took evasive action when targeted, found themselves facing bombers that absorbed punishment without deviation. Luftwaffe fighters, already stretched thin across multiple fronts, discovered that standard interception tactics proved less effective against aircraft that maintained unwavering course, regardless of attack angle. At Caltech, Professor Kaplan receives mission data that confirms his theoretical models while revealing unexpected operational advantages. The unmanned approach creates psychological disruption that compounds physical effects, he notes in a classified memorandum. Enemy defensive responses optimized against human behavior become less effective when that human element is removed from the equation. The evolution of Nightingale Protocol accelerates through late summer 1943. Engineering teams refine guidance systems to incorporate weather variables and improved release mechanisms. Training programs teach crews precise bailout procedures that maximize both survival probability and mission success. Intelligence units coordinate with French resistance to establish recovery zones where downed airmen can expect assistance. Captain David Levinson, a psychologist attached to Bomber Command, studies the transformation in crew attitudes. Initial resistance gives way to grudging acceptance, then to strategic enthusiasm, as survival rates climb while mission effectiveness improves. The protocol reframes bailout from admission of defeat to tactical advantage, he observes. It's no longer abandonment, it's mission optimization. Not every mission justifies implementation of the protocol. Targets deep in German territory, beyond the range of resistance networks, still require full crews for the return journey. Weather conditions that demand constant course adjustment necessitate human judgment throughout the mission profile. The Nightingale system evolves into one tactical option among many, deployed when conditions favor its particular advantages. By September 1943, the Allied breakout from Normandy gains momentum, pushing German forces into increasingly desperate defensive positions. The Nightingale Protocol contributes to this success through precision strikes that minimize friendly casualties while maximizing tactical impact. What began as a desperate experiment transforms into standard doctrine taught at training facilities across England and eventually incorporated into bombing operations throughout the European theater. Helena Winters receives the Presidential Medal for Merit in a private ceremony at the White House, her contribution to the war effort classified beyond the knowledge of anyone without cosmic-level clearance. Martin Kaplan's theoretical work forms the foundation for post-war development of guided missile systems. Richard Donovan establishes maintenance protocols that influence aircraft design for decades following the war's conclusion. Lieutenant Thomas Mitchell, initially among the protocol's strongest critics, completes 27 missions, including 6 implementing Nightingale procedures. His after-action reports provide invaluable feedback that refines the system through multiple iterations. "I still prefer hands-on flying," he admits during a debriefing, "but I can't argue with results. We're hitting targets more accurately and bringing more crews home alive." The broader implications extend beyond tactical bombing operations. Military planners recognize patterns applicable to multiple domains, circumstances where removing human intervention produces better outcomes than even the most skilled operator could achieve. This insight influences development of automated systems ranging from torpedo guidance to artillery fire control, establishing principles that reshape military technology through the remainder of the 20th century. As Allied forces push toward Germany, the legend of ghost bombers enters Luftwaffe mythology. German pilots report aircraft that continue their approach despite catastrophic damage, maintaining formation when conventional wisdom dictates they should fall from the sky. Intelligence officers attribute these reports to propaganda or battlefield stress, unaware that in specific circumstances, unmanned bombers were delivering firepower with mathematical precision that human crews could never match. The true significance of the Nightingale Protocol remains classified for decades following the war. Its contribution to Allied victory subsumed within broader narratives of technological advancement and tactical innovation. The pilots who abandoned their aircraft receive little public recognition for their courage in implementing a strategy that contradicted everything their training had emphasized. Their contribution to victory comes not from heroic persistence, but from the disciplined acceptance of counterintuitive, tactical reality. By war's end, over 700 bombing missions incorporate elements of the protocol, delivering more than 12,000 tons of ordnance with unprecedented precision. The strategic impact accelerates German defensive collapse while reducing Allied casualties, shortening the European conflict by an estimated 7 weeks. Military historians later identify the Nightingale Protocol as among the war's most significant tactical innovations, comparable to the development of proximity fuses or deployment of airborne divisions. In 1978, declassified documents finally reveal the full scope of the program. Thomas Mitchell, by then a retired Air Force general, speaks at a recognition ceremony honoring the crews who participated in the original protocol implementation. "They called us cowards for abandoning our aircraft," he tells the audience. "The truth is that jumping into enemy territory took more courage than staying in the cockpit. These weren't pilots running from danger. They were airmen embracing a better way to complete the mission." Eleanor Winters, attending the ceremony at 88 years old, listens with quiet satisfaction. The technology she helped develop, eventually evolved into guidance systems used throughout military and civilian aviation. The principles established through Nightingale Protocol influence automated systems across multiple domains, from manufacturing process control to modern flight management computers. What began as a counterintuitive approach to precision bombing has become foundational to technological development across the latter 20th century. The most important breakthrough wasn't technological, she observes after the ceremony. It was psychological, the recognition that human control isn't always optimal. That was the real innovation, and the hardest one for people to accept. The legacy endures through contemporary military doctrine that balances human judgment with automated precision, recognizing that each has circumstances where its advantages prove decisive. Modern precision-guided munitions incorporate principles first established through Nightingale Protocol, delivering accuracy that World War II bombardiers could scarcely imagine possible. Unmanned aerial vehicles extend this evolution, conducting missions where human presence represents unnecessary risk rather than tactical advantage. Perhaps the most significant legacy lies not in specific technologies, but in the methodological approach, the willingness to challenge fundamental assumptions when evidence suggests alternatives might produce better results. The pilots who deliberately bailed out over enemy territory, trusting mathematics over instinct, demonstrated a form of courage different from but equal to conventional heroism. They abandoned not their mission, but their preconceptions, and in doing so helped secure victory through means nobody had initially believed possible. In the classified archives at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the original mission reports from St. Lo remain preserved, their yellowing pages documenting a turning point in military aviation history. The handwritten notes from Technical Sergeant Donovan detail modifications that transformed conventional bombers into automated precision platforms. The mathematical formulas developed by Professor Kaplan establish principles still applicable to contemporary guidance systems. The psychological insights compiled by Captain Levinson influence human factors engineering across multiple domains. Together, these documents tell the story of innovation born from necessity, of conventional wisdom abandoned when evidence revealed better alternatives. The pilots who jumped from their aircraft weren't fleeing responsibility, but embracing a more effective approach to completing their mission. In doing so, they demonstrated that true courage sometimes means leaving behind not just aircraft, but assumptions, particularly when those assumptions no longer serve the ultimate objective. The unmanned bombers that struck their targets with unprecedented accuracy represent more than historical curiosity. They embody a principle applicable far beyond military operations, that optimal solutions sometimes require abandoning comfortable paradigms, that progress often comes from recognizing when human intervention creates variables that undermine desired outcomes. The pilots who activated automatic guidance systems before parachuting into hostile territory weren't abandoning their duty. They were fulfilling it through means that redefined the very nature of aerial warfare. As Allied forces pushed toward eventual victory, the lessons of the Nightingale Protocol informed operations across the European theater. The recognition that removing human variables could improve precision in specific circumstances influenced tactical planning from artillery fire control to naval bombardment. What began as desperate improvisation evolved into systematic methodology, establishing principles that would reshape military operations through the remainder of the 20th century and beyond. The true revolution wasn't technological but conceptual, the recognition that in specific circumstances, human intervention created variables that undermined precision rather than enhanced it. This insight challenged fundamental assumptions about control, expertise, and operational doctrine, establishing principles that would influence fields ranging from manufacturing process control to transportation systems design. The pilots who deliberately abandoned their aircraft weren't surrendering control, but transferring it to systems optimized for specific phases of mission execution. Their legacy endures through contemporary automated systems that balance human judgment with algorithmic precision, recognizing appropriate domains for each. The counterintuitive discovery that sometimes abandoning direct control produces better outcomes continues influencing technological development across multiple domains, from surgical robotics to financial transaction systems. What those bomber crews demonstrated through their willingness to bail out over enemy territory was that progress sometimes requires leaving behind not just platforms but paradigms, particularly when evidence suggests better alternatives exist. In that sense, they abandoned nothing that mattered. They simply found a better way to complete the mission.